Welcome back to the Denim Nerds. I am Josh, and we need to talk about the Thunderbolts movie. The ending was pretty wild, actually. I think there's stuff that people are missing. Talking about the film itself, but also the post-credits scene. But let's start with what happened in the actual film. Let's break down this goddamn ending. To me, the ending of the Thunderbolts really starts after Val uses the kill switch on the Sentry. Obviously, Bob Reynolds was the only survivor of the Project Sentry. He was in a test facility. They actually just have him with all these other people that they were going to throw out in the trash. Val was, of course, trying to cover up anything from Project Sentry because there was an investigation on her. And yeah, she was literally doing illegal experiments to try to create super people. It's kind of messed up. So anyway, Sentry gets his groove back, starts going crazy. Val thinks she can control him. She cannot. And then she pops a kill switch, or I guess more accurately, her assistant pops the kill switch as Sentry is about to kill Val. And I think most people think that Sentry died in that moment, but I don't really think so. I mean, he's literally godlike in power, right? So I don't think he actually died, but yeah, like he has an explosive device that goes off in his brain. You kind of see that his eyes roll back. It actually looks very similar to that one Mission Impossible movie when people had little bombs in their brains. I wonder if that was like something they looked at in the film because it looked a lot like that. But either way, if you really think about it, if this guy is Superman level strong, which like we saw a bunch of bullets bounce off of him, we saw him land from very high up in the sky and be unharmed, he's at least Superman level strong. He didn't die. He had like a super concussion. Like this bomb going off just kind of gave him a concussion. And what is a concussion? A concussion is basically bruising in the brain, and it causes fluid to go all over the place in the brain, which hampers brain function and eventually can lead to some really bad things like CTE.
So you think you got CTE?
If you consider that, then what was really going on after the kill switch went off in Sentry's brain was him being incredibly concussed, and that is probably why his mind was so fractured. And I think this also allowed the Void to take more control, because the way I think of the Void is that it is the more primitive side of Bob Reynolds' psyche. It's like his reptilian brain or his like instinctual self. It's like the dark side of him. And the reason I know this is because that's like the whole point of the character. It's meant to be the dark side of our personality. It's a very human thing. We all have a dark side. We all have a proclivity to do some pretty twisted and messed up things, especially when we feel cornered or trauma forces us into an animalistic state. And that's what I think was going on with the Sentry and the Void. After being incredibly concussed, Bob Reynolds' consciousness was fractured and he was unable to fully control the more primitive side of him. And of course, because of the Sentry serum and that super soldier program, he had a very bad side of him. Like it's like a god. And obviously this is the reason that Sentry has been a very popular character. Even from when he was first introduced in comics, he's represented a tangible physical version of the conflict of light and dark, which does permeate through every human being. It's all around us. It's in the world. This is what Star Wars is about. This is what Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is about. This is what True Detective Season 1 is about.
It's just one story. The oldest.
Okay.
Light versus dark.
Okay, so super concussion given to Sentry. Void takes over the body and starts destroying people over New York City. Now, I think there are multiple ways to interpret this ending, but there's a couple of questions that I had after watching it. At first, I asked myself, are these people really being killed or are they being sent to some other dimension? Because the way that Yelena enters the Void is very similar to the way that all these other people just die. And I guess this question really goes to like, what are the Sentry's powers? But just given what I know from the comics, my interpretation of this is that he's literally manipulating matter. So he's literally kind of doing a version of the Snap and just erasing these people's existence, and then the byproduct of their leftover matter is that shadowy substance. However, I think that something different happened when Yelena entered, and my theory is that even though Sentry was concussed and he wasn't in full control and the Void part of him was taking over, that somehow, some way, Bob Reynolds still wanted to protect Yelena. And so even though the material side of Yelena had disappeared just like everybody else, her consciousness or her being was somehow preserved and brought into the consciousness of Bob Reynolds. This allows Yelena to make a connection to that side of Bob Reynolds' psyche and eventually get him to turn against the Sentry and try to take back control. And then, of course, the rest of the Thunderbolts, or the New Avengers, they enter this void world as well, and they all help Bob. But I seriously think the only reason this happened was because Bob Reynolds had formed some kind of connection with this team, and particularly and obviously with Yelena. So that's crazy, because that just kind of gives you like a big idea of the scope of Sentry and the Void's power. He was literally just erasing people, taking over. It wasn't like he was spreading some kind of dimensional thing. No, he totally atomized people and then did the same thing to Yelena and the team, but somehow was able to preserve their soul or consciousness. That's like the full scope of the powers of the Infinity Gauntlet. Like, that's kind of fucking crazy. But it doesn't end with a fight. It ends with letting go as the Sentry starts to fight against the Void, and yet we start to see that the Sentry himself is becoming the Void as he unleashes his frustration and anger. This was totally a Star Wars Return of the Jedi ending, and I absolutely loved it, because everybody started to notice that Bob was becoming the very thing he was trying to destroy. And there's something crazy about that. It's just like the moment where Luke realizes that if he kills Vader, he becomes Vader. And so the rest of the team notices this. They try to get him to stop fighting, and then they all gather around him and they're holding him back, but really it felt like they were just more holding him, like literally just supporting him, like helping him, trying to get him to pull away from that darkness. And it works, and they all then return and everybody's back to life. So what that means is that somehow, some way, at some level of consciousness, Bob then just undid all of the molecular matter manipulation shit that he had done to make everybody disappear in the first place. Pretty crazy fucking power. Like, holy shit, that is a lot of power. That's pretty accurate to Sentry in the comics, right? That he can do this. Like, he once ripped apart the Molecule Man and put them back together. Insanity. And so yeah, that's really crazy. But then Bob doesn't remember anything. So whatever happened, maybe it was the concussion, maybe it's just like his power stopping him from remembering. But either way, he doesn't remember anything. And so the whole team's kind of like back to square one. But they do have that connection with him, and hopefully they could bring him back if anything else bad happened. And then they go to confront Valentina and take her in, and they're tricked into coming on stage and being presented as the new Avengers, as her big plan for the Avengers, and they decide to go along with it. Yelena remarks to Valentina that they own her now. And the obvious implication there is that because this new Avengers team is tied to making people like Valentina and accept her, that the Avengers will be able to use that to basically control Valentina. And that's cool, but we'll see how that goes, obviously. That's probably why Sam Wilson is super mad about this entire Avengers thing. Okay, so that's the ending of the movie, and then we gotta talk about this crazy post-credit scene. It is 14 months into the future. There is a new Avengers logo. They are in the Avengers Tower, and they have obviously been the new Avengers publicly for that entire time. Now, there's a couple of really interesting things to talk about in this post-credit scene, but I want to begin here by saying that this was not shot by Jake Schreier. Jake Schreier was the director of the Thunderbolts movie, but he recently came out in an interview to explain that he didn't shoot that. That essentially, that scene was shot a month ago, and it was shot on the set of Avengers Doomsday. And even though Jake Schreier didn't confirm this, Eric Voss from New Rockstars claims to know for a fact that that scene was directed by the Russo brothers. So this post-credit scene is actually the first footage from the set of Avengers Doomsday. So that's really cool, but let's talk about the scene itself. There's a couple of interesting things going on. Number one, there is a clash between Bucky and Sam Wilson over who is the Avengers. In fact, Bucky comes back from a meeting with Sam Wilson in this scene, and he remarks that it didn't go well. He remarks that Sam thinks he has the Avengers team because he has the shield, and Bucky kind of understands that. And then I believe it was Yelena, but somebody on the team tells Bucky that Sam Sam Wilson has filed trademark for the Avengers. So let me explain what's going on here. So basically, Sam Wilson becomes Captain America, like officially in Brave New World. Everybody sees him stop President Ross, and that happens before the Thunderbolts movie. And Captain America was tasked with reforming the Avengers, and that shield does represent Captain America and the Avengers. But obviously, President Ross turned into the Hulk, and that shit was crazy. So a lot of people probably view Sam Wilson as like not actually the Avengers and not actually Captain America. Ironically here, people probably view Sam as illegitimate, mostly because he was tasked to be Captain America and do the Avengers stuff by Ross. And it's tricky politics, but Valentina kind of swoops in and presents herself and her team as the more reasonable, more safe version of the actual Avengers. And I bet Sam Wilson is so mad about that because he knows Valentina is crooked as hell. He knows that Bucky has a team of essentially evil mercenaries that now are being called the Avengers. And Sam probably also knows how dangerous the Sentry is. And I would imagine Bucky's perspective on this is like, dude, we have to have protectors. These people actually did come together. I'm watching over them. I'm leading them. They're not perfect, but neither were the original Avengers. And Sam Wilson's probably like, I don't want to hear any of that shit, Bucky. You're ridiculous. This is ridiculous. Hell no. I have the Avengers. Now, I kind of feel like doing a whole video about what this actually means for the MCU because it's obvious that this Valentina team of new Avengers has access to Tony Stark technology, including the tower itself. Because remember, the government takes all of Tony's stuff. So like all that Stark tech, Damage Control has that. Damage Control is under the purview of the United States government. So maybe I'll do a whole video exploring that because I think it's fascinating, but I think the only thing you really need to know is that this team is well equipped. They have a lot of tech, but they don't have a ton of experience. Sam Wilson is probably working with Bruce Banner, perhaps Carol Danvers, maybe even Wong or Doctor Strange because he has more connections to those actual heroes. A lot of those people would probably still not trust Bucky, by the way, which is kind of interesting. Maybe they'll play off of that in Avengers Doomsday. But it's also obvious that that team has a lot of access as well because one of the other things that happens in this post-credit scene is Yelena speaking about something that's going on in space that they are being kept in the dark about. And what that implies to me is that there's something going on out there that they know is bad or dangerous, but they don't have the ability to properly view it or know what it is. And this is obviously because SWORD would have that kind of access. And SWORD is still run by Nick Fury. And I would imagine Nick Fury would be holding that away from Valentina's team of Avengers. Now, this scene ends with a multi-dimensional portal opening up and the Fantastic Four ship flying through. And this is obviously Pedro Pascal and the Fantastic Four entering into the Marvel Cinematic Universe where they will have some kind of an interaction with Bucky and his team and probably Sam and his team. So let me set up the full scope of what's going on and then I'll talk about what I know from rumors because a lot of people still think that the Fantastic Four movie is going to end with that universe being destroyed. And then that would mean that after that movie, Reed and his family show up into Earth 616. But that's not what's actually going on there. And I'll explain that in a second. Let's run through the basics here. So in Brave New World, in that post-credit scene, we had the leader who was this guy that had a gamma charged up brain. He explains to Sam Wilson that he's seen what is happening in the probabilities and that there's about to be a battle with all kinds of worlds or universes. And then we have the formation of the new Avengers under Valentina after the events of the Thunderbolts movie. Now, 14 months after that, there's a conflict between Sam's team and Bucky's team, and there's some kind of event going on in space. Now, I personally believe this event will be the beginning of an incursion. And that has to do with rumors for Avengers Doomsday, which basically say that a big incursion will take place between Earth 616 and an X-Men universe. This X-Men universe will be the X-Men universe from the end of the Marvels, where Monica Rambeau is marooned after leaving the Earth 616 universe. So you're getting Avengers versus X-Men via that big incursion. That's a massive rumor for Doomsday. A lot of people are talking about that. So that is what I think the event in space is. And remember that SWORD was already monitoring a phenomenon outside of Earth. This is actually what ends up becoming the incursion at the end of the Marvels. Okay, so I think that's what's going on there. But then you have this multi-dimensional thing opening, a portal between dimensions, and you're going to have the Fantastic Four entering our universe. Now, there's a couple of different reasons that they could be doing this. Number one, it is possible that their universe was destroyed because according to the rumors I've heard, they actually are still going to destroy that universe, but they're going to do it in Doomsday. They're not doing it in the Fantastic Four movie, at least not in the actual movie. Maybe it's still on for the post-credit scene, although I doubt it. I've heard Marvel just change that. They want that movie to end happily, and then all the doom will happen in Doomsday. So it's possible that the Fantastic Four is entering the 616 because their universe was destroyed, and they're just trying to find a new universe. But it is also possible that the Fantastic Four starts studying incursions, much like the Reed Richards and the Baxter Building did in Multiverse of Madness. Remember, that's a basically modern day, right? That's in the 2020s. But the Fantastic Four movie takes place mostly in the actual 60s within that universe. Or perhaps they're in a version of modern day that was affected a lot by them just being there, and it's sort of retro tech. Either way, this is early on in the formation of the Fantastic Four, and if we just look at how far along John Krasinski's Reed Richards was, because he already had a family, then we could surmise that by the time Pedro Pascal's Reed Richards gets to that age, he will begin mapping out the multiverse. And so it is possible that Reed Richards comes to the Earth 616 because of the incursion. He sees the incursion happening, he sees that the multiverse is collapsing, and he's there to try to help. Maybe he's there because he ultimately believes that Doctor Doom is behind these incursions and he's there to try to warn them against him. Or maybe he's just doing what Reed does, and that's try to help. Now, I want to leave you with this thought here because we do kind of know that there's going to be a big time jump between the Fantastic Four movie and this post-credit scene here. Number one, because we can see in a photo posted by Pedro Pascal on set of Doomsday that his outfit's going to change a lot and it's going to look more like modern MCU. And we also know that Franklin Richards is going to basically be a newborn, perhaps a small child in the Fantastic Four film, but he will literally be aged up to between 10 to 13 for Doomsday. So it's very likely the Fantastic Four movie ends and Reed Richards for the next 10 years within that universe starts to map out and study the multiverse. And this scene here at the end of Thunderbolts is 10 years after the movie we're all about to see, and Reed is coming to try to help them deal with this incursion. That's what I think is going on. That's how I think they're going to set up a big conflict between the Avengers and the X-Men, and Reed's going to be trying to save everybody. Doom's going to be doing his thing. It's going to get crazy. That's how I interpret all of this being set up. There you go, guys. Just want to explain that ending. It's not what you think. Let me know your thoughts about this in the comment section below. And as I always say, I hope you are having an awesome and a nerdy day, and I'll see you in the next